Africa, the mother continent. Today we know that the first steps toward humanity were taken more than 5 million years ago on these dry, dangerous plains. But 70 years ago, when the forbidding caverns of southern Africa surrendered their first tiny skull, it ignited one of the greatest controversies of 20th century science. That fossil would spawn struggle and heartbreak, triumph and outright fraud. And its discoverer was Raymond Dart.
What would humanity know of the world if it hadn't been for the people who've discovered? We're not likely to know the future until we know much more about the past, not only on Earth, but elsewhere. And that's what we're doing. We've learnt about the moon during the last few years. These are all things that are obvious to anybody who's got any brains. But most people enjoy not using their brains and filling their bellies. Am I right or wrong?
Raymond Dart's discovery was the opening salvo of the Skull Wars, a brash challenge to the scientific wisdom of his day. In December of 1922, Dr. Raymond Dart embarks on what will become the great adventure of his life. A 2-week journey brings him to South Africa. Dart feels cut off for the first time and cast aside. His specialty is the brain, and his passion, human evolution. But no one has ever made an important discovery about either in Africa. But that will soon change through Raymond Dart's genius. Dart arrives in Johannesburg with his American wife Dora and a few cases of laboratory equipment.
I hated the idea of uprooting myself from what was then the world's center of medicine, with the giants of the profession, to take over the anatomy department at Johannesburg's university.
He had come from London, the world's center for the study of evolution. In the aftermath of the First World War, promising scientists from across the British Empire had flocked to the city. Among them, the young Australian anatomist, Raymond Dart. At University College, he met and worked with the giants of anthropology, Dr. Grafton Elliott Smith and Sir Arthur Keith. But after 3 years, Dart's dream job suddenly ended. Arthur Keith recommended that Dart take a teaching post in distant South Africa, a decision the newly knighted Sir Arthur would live to regret. Johannesburg in 1923 is a gold rush boomtown that has exploded from a village of 20 people into a city of over 100,000. It's a place for adventurers where wealth is measured in ounces, not dollars.
The very idea revolted me. I did not have the slightest interest in holding a professorship anywhere, least of all one newly founded, utterly unknown, as remote as possible from libraries and literature. and devoid of every other facility for which I had yearned.
But unknown to Raymond Dart, an awesome secret awaits his exploration, far closer than he dares to dream. In weathered limestone caves on the fringe of the Kalahari Desert lie buried treasures. Bones that will lure him back through the ages to the enigma of human origin. By comparison, the university laboratory seems to hold little promise.
The architect had overlooked the necessity for water taps, electric plugs, gas or compressed air for the student laboratories. It was no good bemoaning our fate, however, and with a new term only a month away, action was essential.
With few teaching materials at his disposal, he asks his students to bring in any old bones they may come across. In 1924, Dart's student, Josephine Salmon, brings the skull of an extinct baboon that she found being used as a paperweight. When Dart asks where it came from, he is told the quarry at Taung. 400 miles away, dynamite at Taung has begun to reveal cave habitats of extinct baboons. Professor Dart is amazed. He's never heard of ancient ape fossils in southern Africa. He requests that any interesting finds be sent to him. On the morning of November 28, 1924, 2 crates are delivered from Taung. Dart is about to host a colleague's wedding.
I wrenched the lid off the first box, and my reaction was one of extreme disappointment. In the rocks, I could make out traces of fossilized eggshells and turtle shells, and a few fragmentary pieces of isolated bone, none of which looked to be of much interest. Impatiently, I wrestled with the lid of the second box, still hopeful. At most, I anticipated baboon skulls, little guessing that from this crate was to emerge a face that would look out on the world after an age-long sleep of nearly 1 million years.
And there's another treasure, the fossilized cast of a tiny brain.
It was the brain cast that caught his eye. He was a brain-trained man, and he thought he could detect on that brain cast certain features which he knew were human-like rather than ape-like.
In 1924, this is an astonishing concept. Most scientists doubt that Africa played any role in human evolution. But there was one exception, Charles Darwin. In 1871, he had predicted that in Africa, the home of the modern apes, we would find traces of the so-called missing link. The first ancient apes that had begun to look and behave like human beings. Raymond Dart thinks he may have found the skull to prove Charles Darwin right.
Although I had no experience in doing this, there was nobody to whom I could turn. Working away with a hammer, chisels, and knitting needle, in constant fear that the slightest slip of the chisel would shatter the relic within. No diamond cutter ever worked more lovingly, or with such care, on a priceless jewel. My excitement grew as I became more convinced that the whole face would be there. At night, I was in a fever of thoughts about cave-dwelling apes, impatient for dawn to break. On December 23rd, the rock parted. I could view the face from the front. The creature was no giant anthropoid gorilla. What emerged was a baby's face, an infant with a full set of teeth. I doubt if there was any parent prouder of his offspring than I was of my Taung baby on that Christmas of 1924.
In the eloquent silence of the ancient child's eyes, Raymond Dart knows he has found the missing link that Darwin prophesied.
In that dim and distant past, before man had yet appeared on Earth, South Africa was peopled with a race of beings who were vastly superior in intelligence to modern chimpanzees and gorillas. These superior beings were more erect, relied on their feet for walking, and were more adept in the use of their hands. A creature neither a human being nor an ape, but a creature intermediate between the two.
He was a person with the right bent of mind to handle that skull. Instead of dismissing it as a kind of offbeat African chimpanzee that had taken the wrong pathway in its life, he saw that it was on the threshold of humanity and made so bold at 31 years of age to claim that.
Dart's announcement that he has found the missing link in South Africa will stun and amaze the scientific world and touch off a bitter 30-year War of the Skulls. London, 1925. With a brash stroke of confidence, the young Raymond Dart has rushed an article about the Taung skull to the journal Nature, describing the South African fossil he believes to be the missing link to human evolution. At first, reaction to Dart's discovery is rather positive. Even from England's Sir Arthur Keith, the most prominent anthropologist of his era. But just 1 week later, the full impact of the unique skull sinks in. In an abrupt about-face led by Keith, the British dismiss Taung.
We don't know how old it is.
Dangerous to draw any conclusions.
He was a baby chimpanzee.
It was
too young in geological
Not in the
terms.
human line.
Taung was a recent ape. Piltdown was a man.
The fossil was too young a child.
Not human.
Not a missing link, but an anthropoid ape.
The Taung skull from Africa contradicts the favorite British skull, Piltdown Man. "13 years earlier, an amateur fossil hunter named Charles Dawson had reported the discovery of an ancient fossil in a gravel pit near the village of Piltdown. Piltdown Man appears to be a creature truly caught between man and ape, with a human-sized brain and an ape-like jaw. The cream of British science agreed. Piltdown becomes Sir Arthur Keith's holy relic. To him, it was the evolution of the rational mind that set us apart from our animal ancestors.
It was the expectation of people at the time that our earliest ancestor became human in his brain and brain size before it humanized in teeth and posture. And so the comic picture of the caveman used to show a creature that was hulking over with large fangs, usually dripping gore, but with a large brain on top of that. The Tong child had a little brain, but human-like teeth and a human-like posture. It was totally contrary to the image that had fixed itself in people's minds before 1925.
So far, the search for missing lynx skulls has been confined to Europe and Asia. And some find it easier to imagine the white race having evolved from Asians than from black Africans.
There was a bias on the part